In 1839, Robert Smalls was born to an enslaved single mother on a plantation in the coastal inlet town of Beaufort, South Carolina. Raised in an American society much different from our own, institutional racism and prejudice were tolerated, celebrated, and legal during Robert's lifetime. He was unfortunate to be a slave from birth, spending half his life being considered a substandard human. Despite the hardships, inequality, and injustice he faced, Robert Smalls lived an honorable, prosperous, and selfless life. A true American hero, Robert didn't allow the adversity and persecution he suffered to prevent him from achieving the impossible. An assessment of Smalls' life causes one to wonder how such an accomplished man who moved mountains for our country isn't a household name.
There are many aspects of Robert Smalls' life that I find exemplary, but one of the stories that comes to mind is the fact that Robert Smalls, as a slave, was able to negotiate the terms with his quote-unquote master on what he thought would be a fair exchange for his services. And the fact that Robert Smalls learned a trade in his own right is pretty amazing and impressive, considering that he was in his late teens, early 20s when he decided to save up this amount of money. Now, the money that he saved was not just for his own needs, but so he could purchase the freedom of his wife and children. That right there to me speaks of self-motivation, self-discipline, and also the idea of self-sacrifice. And these were traits that Robert Smalls would show and illustrate through the course of his life.
At the start of the American Civil War at Fort Sumter, Robert Smalls worked on a boat named the Planter. Robert's job was to provide labor on the boat and help transport goods through the Charleston, South Carolina river channels and coastal areas where Fort Sumter and other key Confederate military installations were located. As the Civil War escalated, the Planter was transformed from a boat used to haul cash crops to a floating armory. The boat was repurposed and refitted for storing and transporting weapons for the Confederates' war effort. The USA Union forces recognized the strategic importance of the Charleston waterways to the Confederates' military and financial interests, so they instituted a military blockade that prevented ships from leaving the Charleston harbor to the Atlantic Ocean. While many people saw this as a life-threatening blockade, Robert Smalls saw something entirely different. He saw the blockade as his best chance of gaining freedom. Thus, Robert began to plan for the most inventive and daring escapade ever.
For those that believe that African slaves lacked intelligence and the ability to think for themselves, Robert Smalls blew those false narratives and concepts literally and figuratively out of the water. When Robert Smalls decided to commandeer the Planter, the vessel in which he worked upon, to use it as a method to deliver freedom for not only himself but family and friends and crew members, Robert Smalls sent a message that reverberated throughout America, in the Confederate South as well in the North. And the message was really simple. African slaves are capable of thinking for themselves. African slaves are capable of gaining and acquiring their own freedom. And more importantly, African slaves deserve to fight in the effort to gain their freedom. All that was established by Robert Smalls' actions of taking the Planter and delivering the ship to Union forces.
Robert Smalls couldn't read or write, yet that didn't stop him from touring the East Coast to garner support for the Union forces' war effort. Smalls also visited the nation's capital, where he met with President Lincoln and members of his cabinet. He impressed upon the president to allow black people, especially the former slaves, to enlist in the Union Army. Eventually, Smalls and other proponents of black people got their wish of enlistment. Though he's not given enough credit for his efforts, it's fair to say that Smalls played a major role in inspiring a mass enlistment of black people into the Union Army, and the addition of their manpower began to win the war. Smalls also wanted to fight for everyone's freedom, but in a more strategic capacity. Since Robert had insight and intelligence about the Confederates' operations in Charleston, South Carolina waterways, he captained an ironclad ship into 17 naval battles that played a part in winning the Civil War.
Robert Smalls' life reflects for me that no matter the level of oppression, no matter the level of hate and hostility, if you do not allow a victimhood mindset and self-doubt to control your decision-making, you can overcome any and every circumstance by being self-motivated, self-disciplined, and also never being complacent but always striving to do better. And because Robert Smalls throughout the course of his life, despite the oppression, displayed these character traits, is why for me, Robert Smalls is truly an American hero.